Our daughter's wedding was a disaster. Wilted flowers, cold food, no photographer for the ceremony. The wedding planner smiled and said, "These things happen in the business." As I grabbed the microphone for my father of the bride speech, I looked directly at her. "I'd like to thank someone special tonight. Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI, who's been investigating wedding fraud targeting military families. Sarah, could you stand up?" "My name is Gabriel Torres, 41 years old, and I'm a Master Sergeant in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. For 18 months, I'd been planning my daughter Sophia's dream wedding, carefully saving every dollar to give her the perfect day she deserved. What I discovered instead was that some people see military families as easy targets for fraud, believing our deployments and trusting nature make us vulnerable to elaborate scams. The story begins in early 2023 when Sophia announced her engagement to Marcus Williams, a fellow soldier she'd met during her own Army service. Sophia was 22, Marcus was 24, and they were both completing their first enlistments while planning their future together. As Sophia's father and a career soldier myself, I was proud of the young woman she'd become and excited to help her plan the wedding of her dreams. Sophia had been dreaming about her wedding since childhood, collecting magazine clippings and Pinterest boards full of ideas for flowers, venues, and decorations. She wanted an elegant but not extravagant celebration. Approximately 150 guests, beautiful flowers, excellent food, and professional photography to capture memories that would last a lifetime. My wife Maria and I had been saving for Sophia's wedding since she was in high school, setting aside money from each paycheck and deployment bonus to ensure we could afford to give her something special. We'd accumulated approximately $50,000 specifically for wedding expenses, a significant amount that represented years of careful financial planning and sacrifice. The challenge was that military life had left us with limited experience planning formal events. We'd attended plenty of military ceremonies and social functions, but organizing a civilian wedding with vendors, catering, and complex logistics was outside our expertise. We knew we needed professional help to execute Sophia's vision properly. That's when we found Elegant Events by Victoria, a wedding planning company that seemed perfect for our needs. Victoria Blackwood presented herself as a specialist in military family weddings, claiming to understand the unique challenges and requirements of planning celebrations around deployment schedules and military traditions. Victoria's website featured testimonials from dozens of satisfied military families, beautiful photos of elegant weddings, and detailed explanations of her comprehensive planning services that would handle every aspect of Sophia's special day. She offered complete packages that included venue coordination, vendor management, timeline planning, and day of coordination to ensure everything ran smoothly. During our initial consultation, Victoria was impressive and professional. She listened carefully to Sophia's vision, offered creative suggestions that enhanced our ideas, and presented detailed proposals that seemed to address every possible detail. Her portfolio showed beautiful weddings that matched Sophia's style preferences perfectly. "Military families deserve extra attention and care," Victoria told us during that first meeting. "You serve our country, and I serve you by making sure your special day is absolutely perfect. That's my promise to every military family I work with." Victoria's pricing seemed reasonable for the comprehensive services she offered. Her premium package cost $15,000 and included full planning services, vendor coordination, timeline management, and day of coordination. Additional costs for flowers, catering, photography, and venue rental would bring our total investment to approximately $50,000, exactly what we'd budgeted for Sophia's wedding. The contract Victoria presented was professionally formatted and included detailed descriptions of services, payment schedules, and vendor coordination responsibilities. Everything looked legitimate and comprehensive, addressing the specific concerns we discussed about our limited experience with civilian wedding planning. We signed the contract in April 2023 for Sophia's October wedding, giving Victoria 6 months to coordinate vendors and execute the detailed planning process she'd outlined. The payment schedule required 50% upfront, 25% at the 3-month mark, and the final 25% 1 month before the wedding. For the first few months, Victoria's communication was excellent. She provided regular updates about vendor selections, sent photos of floral arrangements and decoration options, and seemed to be making steady progress on all the details we'd discussed. Sophia was excited about the planning process and felt confident that her dream wedding was taking shape. Victoria arranged venue visits, catering tastings, and meetings with photographers that all seemed legitimate and professional. The vendors she introduced us to appeared experienced and capable, with portfolios that matched our quality expectations and pricing that aligned with our budget projections. But as the wedding date approached, I began noticing troubling patterns in Victoria's communication and vendor coordination. Phone calls took longer to be returned. Vendor confirmations became vague, and specific questions about timeline details received evasive answers rather than clear information. When I asked to review final vendor contracts and payment confirmations 3 weeks before the wedding, Victoria claimed that such documentation was proprietary business information that clients didn't typically need to see. She assured me that everything was properly contracted and paid for according to our agreements. My military training had taught me to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, and Victoria's reluctance to provide documentation triggered warning signs I couldn't ignore. I decided to conduct some independent verification of the vendor arrangements she claimed to have made. When I contacted the venue directly, I discovered that Victoria had only paid a small deposit rather than the full amount our contract specified. The venue coordinator was concerned about the balance due and wasn't sure the wedding could proceed without immediate payment of the remaining fees. Similar problems emerged when I contacted the catering company and photographer. Victoria had made minimal payments to secure tentative bookings, but none of the vendors had received the full payments necessary to guarantee their services for Sophia's wedding date. I realized Victoria had been collecting our money without properly paying the vendors, either planning to use last-minute payments to secure services or possibly running some kind of advance fee scam that would leave us without the wedding we'd contracted for. Rather than confronting Victoria immediately, I decided to gather more evidence and explore legal options for protecting Sophia's wedding and recovering our money. I also wanted to understand whether this was simply poor business management or deliberate fraud. Research into Victoria's business history revealed troubling patterns. Multiple complaints had been filed with the Better Business Bureau about unfulfilled contracts, vendor payment problems, and weddings that didn't match what clients had paid for. Several military families had reported similar experiences with advance payments that didn't result in proper vendor arrangements. Most concerning was a pattern of Victoria targeting military families specifically, apparently believing that deployment schedules and limited civilian wedding experience made service members easy targets for fraud schemes. I contacted an attorney who specialized in consumer fraud and provided documentation of our contract, payment history, and evidence of Victoria's failure to secure proper vendor services. The attorney confirmed that Victoria's actions appeared to constitute fraud and recommended involving law enforcement. Rather than simply pursuing civil litigation, we decided to coordinate with federal authorities who investigate fraud targeting military families. The FBI has specific task forces dedicated to protecting service members from scams and fraud schemes, and Victoria's pattern of targeting military families qualified for federal investigation. I contacted FBI agent Sarah Martinez, who specialized in military family fraud cases. Agent Martinez was immediately interested in Victoria's business practices and explained that she'd been investigating similar complaints about wedding fraud targeting military communities. We've been tracking several companies that specifically target military families for wedding and event fraud, Agent Martinez explained. These scammers know that deployments make it difficult for service members to personally verify vendor arrangements, and they exploit the trust and time constraints that military families face. Agent Martinez asked me to continue working with Victoria as if nothing had changed while federal investigators gathered evidence about her business practices and other potential victims. This would allow them to build a comprehensive case while protecting Sophia's wedding through alternative arrangements. Working with Agent Martinez, I began documenting all communications with Victoria and secretly recording phone conversations where she made false claims about vendor payments and service arrangements. The FBI also provided guidance about how to protect other military families who might be targeted by Victoria's scheme. Meanwhile, I quietly arranged backup vendors for Sophia's wedding using our own contacts and emergency funds I'd kept in reserve. If Victoria's scheme collapsed, we'd still be able to provide Sophia with a beautiful wedding celebration. The truth about Victoria's fraud became impossible to hide during the final week before Sophia's wedding. Vendors began calling me directly to discuss unpaid balances and canceled service agreements. The photographer informed me that Victoria had bounced her deposit check. The florist said their order had been canceled due to non-payment, and the catering company was threatening to withdraw from the event entirely. I had no choice but to confront Victoria about the vendor payment problems and demand immediate resolution or full refund of our money. Her response confirmed that this was deliberate fraud rather than business mismanagement. "These are just temporary cash flow issues," Victoria claimed when I demanded explanations about the unpaid vendors. "Everything will be resolved before the wedding. You military families always worry too much about details." When I insisted on seeing proof of vendor payments, Victoria became defensive and accusatory. "You're being unreasonable and untrusting," she said. "I've been planning weddings longer than you've been in the military. Maybe you should focus on your job and let me focus on mine." This response confirmed that Victoria had no intention of properly fulfilling our contract and was attempting to deflect responsibility for her fraud onto our supposed inexperience and military obligations. I informed Agent Martinez that Victoria's scheme was reaching the crisis point and that we needed to accelerate the investigation timeline to protect Sophia's wedding and potentially other victims who might have upcoming events planned through Victoria's company. Agent Martinez coordinated with other federal agents to prepare arrest warrants and asset seizure orders, while I implemented our backup vendor arrangements to ensure Sophia's wedding could proceed as scheduled. The challenge was that Victoria was still planning to attend Sophia's wedding as the coordinator, apparently intending to maintain her fraud until the very end. This gave us an opportunity to expose her scheme publicly while protecting other potential victims in our military community. Agent Martinez arranged to attend Sophia's wedding as a guest, positioning herself to observe Victoria's behavior and potentially make arrests if Victoria attempted to collect final payments or continue her fraud scheme during the event. Sophia's wedding day arrived with a complex mixture of excitement and anxiety. Thanks to our backup arrangements, we'd secured excellent vendors who delivered beautiful flowers, delicious food, and professional photography. But Victoria was still scheduled to appear as the wedding coordinator, unaware that federal agents were prepared to arrest her. The day itself unfolded beautifully, despite the underlying tension. Sophia looked radiant in her wedding dress, Marcus was nervous but excited, and our families came together to celebrate their love and commitment. The backup vendors performed flawlessly, delivering exactly the kind of elegant celebration Sophia had dreamed about. Victoria arrived at the venue early, apparently planning to take credit for the successful event while collecting her final payment and continuing her fraud. She seemed pleased with how everything looked, probably assuming that her minimal vendor payments had somehow produced the quality celebration we'd actually arranged through our backup planning. During the ceremony, Victoria positioned herself prominently, as if she were responsible for coordinating the proceedings. She directed guests, made announcements, and generally acted like the professional wedding planner she'd pretended to be throughout our 6-month relationship. But as the reception began, I knew it was time to expose Victoria's fraud and protect other military families from becoming her future victims. When the dinner service concluded and the traditional speeches were scheduled to begin, I took the microphone to deliver my father of the bride remarks. Sophia was glowing with happiness, Marcus looked proud and grateful, and our guests were enjoying the celebration we'd fought so hard to protect. Victoria was standing near the head table, probably expecting recognition for her supposed coordination efforts and planning to collect her final payment after my speech concluded. Instead, I looked directly at Victoria and began the most important speech of my military career. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly throughout the reception hall, "before I talk about my beautiful daughter and her new husband, I want to thank someone very special who's here tonight." The room quieted as guests turned their attention to my remarks. Sophia smiled, probably expecting me to thank family members or vendors who'd helped make her day special. "I'd like to thank Agent Sarah Martinez from the FBI, who's been investigating wedding fraud targeting military families," I continued, watching Victoria's confident expression begin to change. "Agent Martinez has been working tirelessly to protect service members from scammers who exploit our deployments and sacrifice." The room went completely silent as guests tried to understand what I was saying. Victoria's face had gone pale as she realized her fraud was being exposed publicly. "Sarah," I said, looking directly at Agent Martinez, who was seated at the table 6. "Could you stand up so everyone can see the federal agent who's been helping us catch wedding planners who steal from military families?" Agent Martinez stood up, her FBI credentials clearly visible, and nodded to the stunned guests. Several other agents who'd been positioned throughout the venue also revealed themselves, surrounding Victoria before she could attempt to leave. Victoria tried to maintain her composure, but her hands were shaking as she realized the complete collapse of her scheme. Guests were murmuring in confusion and concern as they understood that the wedding planner had been stealing from the military family hosting the celebration. "Victoria Blackwood," Agent Martinez announced clearly, "you're under arrest for fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to defraud military service members. You have the right to remain silent." As agents placed Victoria in handcuffs, I returned to my speech about Sophia and Marcus, emphasizing that their love and commitment had overcome challenges and deception to create a celebration worthy of their devotion to each other and our country. The arrest added an unexpected element to Sophia's wedding reception, but guests quickly understood that justice was being served while the celebration continued. Many of our military friends approached us afterward to express gratitude for exposing fraud that could have affected their own families. The investigation revealed that Victoria had defrauded more than 30 military families over 2 years, stealing approximately $400,000 in wedding payments while delivering substandard services or canceling events entirely. Her specific targeting of military families was motivated by their deployment schedules and perceived inability to verify vendor arrangements. Victoria was ultimately convicted on multiple federal charges and sentenced to 5 years in prison plus restitution payments to all the military families she'd defrauded. The FBI's investigation also led to arrests of vendors who'd participated in her fraud scheme. Sophia's wedding became a symbol of how military families can protect themselves from fraud while still celebrating life's most important moments. The reception speech that exposed Victoria's crime was recorded by our photographer and became part of the evidence presented during her criminal trial. Today, Sophia and Marcus are happily married and both continuing their military careers. Their wedding day, despite the dramatic arrest, remains a beautiful memory of love, triumphing over deception and family loyalty overcoming fraud. The $50,000 we'd saved for Sophia's wedding was fully recovered through Victoria's restitution payments, and we were able to donate the backup vendor costs to a fund supporting other military families affected by wedding fraud. Victoria's arrest at Sophia's wedding sent a clear message throughout our military community that fraud-targeting service members would be aggressively prosecuted and publicly exposed. Her scheme failed because she underestimated both the investigative capabilities of federal law enforcement and the determination of a military father protecting his daughter's dreams. The reception speech that ended Victoria's criminal career became the most important words I'd ever spoken, not just to celebrate my daughter's marriage, but to ensure that other military families would be protected from the woman who'd tried to steal their most precious moments. Sometimes justice isn't served in courtrooms or through legal proceedings. Sometimes it's served at wedding receptions where federal agents stand up to applause and criminals are arrested while families celebrate love, commitment, and the protection of those who serve our country.